Good day, everyone, and welcome. Here we're looking at a fascinating question. Where are all the dinosaurs in the Bible? Is it just because dinosaurs are too violent, or maybe they're just too big? Well, why didn't they fit them into the Bible, or did they? So, what's with the dinosaurs and the Bible? What do we know about that? Now, it's a very good question, and it comes up all the time. And when it does, students ask, why aren't there dinosaurs in Genesis chapter 1? One of the basic answers that you learn in theology school is that, well, God also hates Barney. So he just wrote him out of his story. I mean, wouldn't you do the same? But it's actually doesn't take quite a lot to explain the whole story. In fact, if you've played the Genesis drawing game and you've looked at what happens in the first few days of Genesis, you're bound to notice that, well, God creates all sorts of living creatures, and not all of them are named. I mean, you don't hear mention of mosquitoes or cheetahs, not to mention dogs and cats and so forth. I mean, they don't specifically get named, but that doesn't mean God isn't responsible for calling all life into being on earth. Now, some other people wonder, well, okay, why doesn't God then tell the ancient Israelites about Darwinian evolution? I mean, this is an account of creation after all. Well, it's true. We don't actually hear the name of Darwin or evolution in the book of Genesis. But the reason why is because God speaks to the Israelites in a manner they can understand, in a way that makes sense to them. It's kind of like, well, when God says, and let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind. Now, just as you, likewise, we don't hear mention of quantum mechanics or string theory in Genesis. And why is that? Well, because the ancient Israelites, well, they wouldn't have understood those concepts. Rather, when God speaks to the first audiences in the book of Genesis, he comes down to their level. He speaks to them in a manner that they would have understood, using concepts and ideas from their culture, including their ancient science and ancient worldview. So Genesis is written in good science, but it just happens to be good science from 3,000 years ago. Just as when God speaks to us today, he speaks in a way that we can understand. And if Genesis were written today, God would use a science that people today understand. He use concepts that we get right now. He wouldn't use science from 3,000 years from now in the future. Rather, he would speak to us in a manner that we would understand in the present, in the here and now. So in short, God condescends to our level. And for this reason, we don't hear about quantum mechanics or string theory or Darwinian evolution in Genesis 1. God speaks in a manner that ancient Israelites would grasp. Now, if you think about the 6 days of creation, we notice a few things. Now, first of all, yes, it's true. God does not mention Barney nor any other dinosaur by name. But there's lots of animals he doesn't mention by name. The point here is that God is responsible for all life, the author of all life. That's one of the concepts God is trying to convey to the ancient Israelites. And if you read closely, you will also notice a subtle pattern that would make sense to the ancient Israelites about how the evolving complexity of life unfolds. Before life begins, the earth is formed. God says, let there be light. And it is so. And here you have, within the creation, eventually there's the waters that are separated from the waters on the second day. Then on the third day, what do we have? Well, this is dry earth, the earth beginning to emerge and so forth. And we hear that this is good. And from here, once the earth emerges, life begins in the sea. And here you find marine life emerging, which again is consistent of what we know about how life begins, vegetation, then marine life. And the narrative continues. And just as your drawings from the Genesis game also reveal, life becomes more and more complex as time passes. To eventually have land animals. On the sixth day, we finally also have, guess who? That's right, humans at the tail end of creation. So we also find a motif, or this movement from what is simple to what is more complex, from vegetative life to marine life to land-based organisms and to finally humans. You know, it's not a story that's filled with theorems and technical language. And I don't think God is really worried if the Israelites start using theorems and all sorts of technical jargon. Rather, there's certain concepts that are more essential that God is conveying here, such as all life comes from God. Also that there is an order and beauty to creation. Creation is also good. It's not evil. It's actually good. Humanity, we also find, is made in the image and likeness of God. We find that humans sin leads to judgment, and God extends his mercy and forgiveness. All right, now some reflection questions. First of all, why do you think God doesn't mention Darwin's name in Genesis or his theory? Second of all, what pattern do we find in the 6 days of creation? How is it similar and different from Darwin's theory of evolution? Third, why does God speak to the ancient Israelites using ideas that they already understand? And finally, why then don't we find dinosaurs being mentioned by name in Genesis? Okay, so why don't we find them mentioned by name? Or could we say they are mentioned? So what do you think? See what you come up with.